Arthur's Family Truth. 7 days after we buried Carol, my son Reed walked into the guest room, the room he'd already assigned me, and dropped a folder on the bed. Eviction notice. 22 days to vacate, he said. I had the farm. I didn't even know what farm. I just picked up the rusted key Carol's attorney had given me and drove 2 hours east alone to a place I'd never seen in my life. My name is Jack Harmon, 66 years old, retired construction engineer. I should back up. Carol, my wife of 38 years, passed on a Tuesday in February, 62 years old, stage 3 cancer. The last night she could barely speak, but she pulled me close and whispered 3 words. Trust the farm. I didn't understand. She squeezed my hand. You'll understand. Trust it. She was gone by morning. 7 days later, I'm sitting in an attorney's office across from my son Reed and his wife Wanda. Reed is 38, financial advisor, lives in Los Angeles. Wanda had her hands folded on the table like she was expecting good news at a doctor's appointment. Gail Briggs, Carol's attorney, opened the folder and started reading to Reed James Harmon, the penthouse located at 22040 Wilshire Terrace, Los Angeles, California. Appraised value $5 million. Wanda exhaled slow. Reed kept his face flat, but his jaw tightened. To Jack Allen Harmon, the family property located in Brewster County, West Texas. 600 acres, including farmhouse and outbuildings. County appraisal, $160,000. Reed blinked. Wait, a farm. The West Texas property, Gail said. Your mother inherited it from her grandparents. It's been in the Caldwell family since 1952. Reed sat back. I could see him doing the math. $5 million penthouse on his side. 600 acres of West Texas dirt on mine. That's it, he said. Dad gets a falling down shack and 600 acres of nothing. Reed, I started. He's 66. Reed looked at Gail like she'd made an error. He was a construction worker. He doesn't know anything about running a farm. That place is worthless. Gail's expression didn't change. The will is very clear. Your mother was specific about this distribution. Reed stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'm calling my own attorney. That's your right, Gail said. But I'll tell you now, this will was drafted with care. If you contest it, you'll spend a lot of money and get the same result. Reed looked at me on his way out. Don't expect me to help you out when you realize you can't pay the taxes on that place. The door closed. Gail slid a cream-colored envelope across the table. Carol's handwriting on the front. Jack open at the farm. Trust me, she also handed me a rusted key, old and heavy, the kind you don't see anymore. This opens the farmhouse, she said. About 2 hours east of Midland. Address is on the deed. I took both and drove back to the house on Brentwood Drive. The house Carol and I had shared for 19 years. The house that was now apparently Reed's. He showed up that evening around 8. I was in the guest room. He'd already told me the master bedroom was off limits, said he was having it refreshed. He walked in without knocking and dropped a folder on the bed. Eviction notice, legal, signed, official letterhead. 22 days to vacate. You've got the farm, he said. Use it. I haven't even seen it, Reed. Then go see it. He was already turning to leave. And when you pack up, don't take anything valuable. I've got an inventory list. The art, the silver, it's all part of the estate. Your mother's books, already being sorted. He was gone before I could say another word. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and looked at the 2 things in my hands, an eviction notice and a rusted key. Outside, I could hear Reed on the phone, laughing about something. I looked at the envelope on the nightstand. Carol's handwriting. Trust me. Okay, I thought 22 days. Then I'll find out what you were trying to tell me. 3 days after the will reading, a man in a Navy suit showed up at the front door. Reed introduced him as Ned Cross. Elder care specialist, he said. We need to talk about your future. We sat at the dining room table and opened a blue folder and slid it toward me. At the top in bold capital letters, General Durable Power of Attorney. He explained it like he was reading off a script. The document gives Reed authority to manage my finances, my property, and my medical decisions. Effective immediately upon signing, I pulled it closer and read the small print. The principal hereby grants the agent irrevocable authority over all bank accounts, real property including parcels in Brewster County, investment portfolios, and healthcare decisions. Irrevocable. I said the word out loud. That means I can't change my mind. Ned nodded. It ensures continuity of care. I flipped to page 3. There was a section highlighted in yellow, something about emergency guardianship. If I was deemed unable to manage my own affairs, Reed could petition a court for full control without notifying me first. I looked at Reed. He had his elbows on the table, leaning forward like he was closing a deal. Sign this and I'll handle the tax lien on the farm, he said. You won't have to worry about anything. And if I don't, Ned tilted his head, your son can petition for emergency guardianship. You're 66, recently widowed, no stable income, about to move to a rural property alone. A judge would likely grant temporary custody of your assets within 72 hours. I looked at my son for a long moment. I thought about the time he was 9 years old and cried for an hour because a stray dog got hit on our street. I thought about the time he called me every Sunday from college just to check in. I looked for that kid somewhere behind his eyes. I didn't find him. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. Get out, Reed stood. You've got 2 weeks. Think about it. Because if you don't sign, I file the petition and a judge decides for you. He and Ned left. I sat alone at that table for a while. 5 days later, I was clearing out the guest room when I noticed the recycling bin by the curb was overflowing. I started sorting through it. Reed had been tossing files all week. A clean manila folder slipped out onto the driveway. The tab read Dad, residential options in Wanda's handwriting. I opened it, glossy brochures, Sunset Pines Senior Living, Elk City, Oklahoma. Low brick building on the cover. Inside, a dining hall with fluorescent lights, plastic food trays, residents parked in front of a muted TV. Below the brochures, a printed contract. Resident name, Samuel Jack Harmon. Shared occupancy, Wingby monthly rate. $2,800 security deposit, $5,600, non-refundable. Move-in date, April 20th. Authorized by Reed Harmon, power of attorney. The signature line for me was blank. Then I saw the date at the bottom, executed, January 28th. I read it again, January 28th. 1 month before Carol passed, while she was still alive. While she was in the hospice bed in our room and I was reading to her every night and telling her everything would be okay, Reed had already signed a contract to lock me away. I took photos of every page and put the folder under a toolbox in my truck. That afternoon, the tax notice came in the mail. $14,200 in back taxes on the Brewster County property. Deadline May 21st. Pay or the county auctions it. Reed was in the living room when I walked in. He glanced at the envelope. Yeah, the lien. I told you about that. You said $10,000. Penalties add up. He set his phone down. Look, I've been thinking, that farm is worthless. 600 acres of brush and a falling down house. But I'll take it off your hands. $75,000 cash. You can rent a place in town, live comfortably. I'll handle the taxes too. I stared at him. $75,000 for land he'd called worthless 10 seconds ago. I'll think about it, I said. That evening, Gail called. She already knew about the offer. Reed had contacted her earlier trying to get the trust waived. Don't sell, she said. The farm is in an irrevocable trust, Jack. Reed has no legal claim. I've already filed an extension with the assessor. You have until June 30th to settle the lien. Then why is he pushing so hard? Because he knows something you don't. Go to the farm on the 29th. Open the envelope. Everything you need is there. She paused. And don't sign anything. Not the POA, not a sales contract, nothing. 2 days before I had to leave, I woke up to a bulldozer in the backyard at 6 a.m, landscaping crew. Reed was putting in a pool. They were tearing straight through Carol's rose garden. 20 years of planting gone in minutes. I ran outside barefoot, watched the blade rip through the lavender, the daylilies, everything she'd planted by hand. Then I saw it, one bush still standing at the far edge, the yellow rose. Carol had planted it on our 25th anniversary. Said she chose yellow because it was the color she wore the day we met. I walked past Reed, past the bulldozer, and got down on my knees in the dirt, started digging with my hands. Reed said something behind me. I didn't stop. I worked the roots loose, lifted the whole bush carefully, carried it to my truck with dirt falling down my arms. You can't take that, Reed said. I kept walking. I laid the bush in the truck bed, wrapped the roots in a tarp, and drove away. In the mirror, I could see Reed standing in the driveway watching me go. Phone already in his hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 11, my phone buzzed, a text from Reed. Offer stands until Friday, $75 KLA. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Reed's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer and mute my side immediately. Reed didn't know I was listening. Yeah, I'm at the house, he said, voice low. He drove out to that dump today. Took a rose bush. A pause. Someone else talking, but I couldn't hear them. I know. But if he figures out what's under that land before I get him to sign, we lose everything. Another pause. The guardianship petition is ready. Lawyer says we file Monday if he doesn't sell, then we move him into that place in Elk City, and I take over as conservator. After that, the land is ours. I fumbled for the voice recorder app and hit record. He doesn't suspect anything. He taught construction his whole life. He has no idea what he's sitting on. The call ended. I sat in the dark with my heart going fast. The recording still running. I stopped it, played it back. Reed's voice came through clear. Guardianship petition. Move him into that place in Elk City. The land is ours. I saved it to the cloud and labeled it. March 28, Reed call. Then I lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't offering $75,000 out of generosity. He was trying to steal something. Something under that land worth far more than he'd ever admit to me. And Carol had known 2 more days. Then I'd find out what she'd left me and what Reed had been trying to take. March 29th. I tore Reed's check in half on the front porch, handed him the pieces, picked up my duffel bag, and walked to my truck. He dropped the offer to $40,000 that morning. Showed up with it folded in his jacket pocket like he was doing me a favor. Last chance, Dad. $40,000 cash. Walk away clean. I looked at him standing there in his pressed shirt, and I thought about the recording on my phone, about the Sunset Pines contract signed while Carol was still breathing, about $280,000 missing from accounts she'd worked 30 years to build. I tore the check in half, then in quarters handed the pieces back. I'll take my chances, I said. He shouted something as I got in the truck. I didn't catch it. Didn't try to. The drive to Brewster County took just over 2 hours. I left the suburbs behind, got on Highway 90, and watched the land open up, flat scrubland, mesquite, red dirt, barbed wire running for miles in every direction. No billboards, no strip malls, just sky and distance. The farmhouse was at the end of a gravel road marked with a mailbox that had Harmon painted on it in faded black letters. Small wood frame structure, white paint gone gray, porch sagging on the left side, one shutter hanging loose. Behind it, a big red barn, half the roof sheeted in rusted tin, doors hanging crooked on iron hinges. I parked in the dirt yard and got out. Quiet, just wind through the brush and the creak of that barn door swinging. Reed's voice in my head. Worthless dirt, falling down shack, what do you know about any of this? I pulled the rusted key from my pocket and climbed the porch steps. The boards groaned but held. I'd planted Carol's yellow rose in a whiskey barrel by the door the day before. The roots had already settled in, the leaves still green. The key turned. I pushed the door open. Dust floated in the afternoon light. Single room, small kitchen area, bare floor, a card table, an old military-style trunk pushed against the far wall. 2 envelopes on the table. One sealed with red wax from the will reading. One from Gail's office, my name in Carol's handwriting. I sat down and opened Gail's envelope first. 1 page. Carol's handwriting. Jack, go to the barn northwest corner behind the hay bales. There's a ladder nailed to the wall, climb it. The rusted key opens what you'll find. I love you. Carol, I grabbed the flashlight from my truck and walked to the barn. Pulled the door open. It groaned like something that hadn't moved in years. Inside smelled like dry hay and old motor oil. Afternoon light came through gaps in the walls and long thin bars. Northwest corner, behind a stack of hay bales, a narrow ladder nailed directly into the wood. I climbed. The attic was low-ceilinged, full of cobwebs, smelled like cedar and dust. I swept the flashlight around, cardboard boxes, a broken chair, and in the far corner, under a canvas tarp, an old military trunk, olive drab, heavy brass padlock. The rusted key fit, the lock clicked open. Inside, 4 folders, neatly labeled in Carol's handwriting. Geological survey. Reed, evidence, red tab. Dale Kessler, conspiracy, blue tab. Trust documents. On top of them, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened it. Jack, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Reed has already tried to take the farm. 3 things you need to know. First, Reed stole $280,000 from us over 18 months. He forged my signature on withdrawal slips, moved money through shell accounts, lied to our accountant. I discovered it in September 2022. I didn't confront him. I documented everything and set a trap instead. The red folder has proof, bank statements, surveillance photos, the forged documents. Second, Reed has been working with a man named Dale Kessler, CEO of Kessler Oil and Gas, since September 2021. Their plan is to force you into a care facility through a fraudulent guardianship petition, take control of this property, and sell the mineral rights. The blue folder has everything. Emails, wire transfers, contracts. Third, this farm sits on top of a Mississippian shale formation. Geological surveys estimate $18 million in recoverable oil. I've already negotiated a drilling partnership with Lone Star Energy out of Midland. They fund all operations, no cost to you. You keep 75% of net royalties. That's roughly 1.2 years to $180 million per year over 20 to 25 years. The farm is in an irrevocable trust in your name alone. No power of attorney, no guardianship petition, no creditor can take it from you. Section 47C includes an ethics clause if Reed contests the will, attempts any fraud, or enters any agreement with Dale Kessler. He forfeits his entire $9.5 million inheritance, and the evidence goes directly to the FBI. Gale has copies. The FBI field office in Dallas has copies. I know this is hard. I know you want to believe he's still who he used to be. But protect yourself, Jack. Protect this land. It's your future now. Trust the farm. Carol, I read it twice. Then I sat down on the attic floor with my back against that trunk and just stayed there for a while. She'd known. While I was sitting beside her bed reading out loud every night, thinking the hardest thing we were facing was cancer, she was building a case, documenting every wire transfer, every forged signature, feeding evidence to the FBI, protecting me from something I didn't even know was happening. I went through the red folder, bank statements with withdrawals highlighted in yellow. Surveillance photos, Reed at a teller window in a suit handing paperwork across the counter. A notary seal on a hardship claim dated 3 days after Carol's diagnosis. Then the blue folder, printed email chain, Dale Kessler to Reed, September 2nd, 2021. Your parents own a parcel in Brewster County. Geological data suggests significant untapped reserves. I believe there's a business opportunity here. Reed's reply, same night, they don't know the land's value. What are you proposing? Further down, a draft purchase contract. 600 acres, Brewster County. Purchase price, $500,000. Seller receives 0 royalty participation. Estimated recoverable reserves, $18 million. Carol had underlined the royalty clause in red ink and written one word beside it, theft. I closed both folders and climbed back down the ladder. That evening, just after dark, I heard boots on the porch steps. 3 slow knocks. Roy Simmons. 70 years old, worn flannel shirt, work jeans, a toolbox in one hand, and a paper grocery sack in the other. He'd been the foreman on Carol's family land going back 20 years. She'd asked him to watch the place. He set the sack on the card table, pulled out a thermos, a wrapped sandwich, and a battery lantern. No electricity out here, he said. Brought you coffee and supper. Then he reached into his jacket and handed me a thick envelope. 20,000 Ashen. Taurel left it with me 6 months ago. Said to give it to you when you showed up alone. He looked at me steady. She paid me to keep an eye on this place, fix the fence, keep people off. Nobody's been here but you. I opened the envelope. Neat stack of bills. Roy sat down across from me. Carol used to stop by my place on her drives out here, he said. Especially after she got sick. One afternoon she sat at my kitchen table for a long time just looking at her coffee. I asked if she was okay. He paused. She said she was trying to figure out when she lost her son. I told her maybe she didn't lose him, maybe he just chose a different road. Roy shook his head slowly. She said, there's no enough for Reed. Not money, not status, not anything. I spent years trying to give him enough, but you can't fill a hole that doesn't have a bottom. That's his problem now. Not mine, not Jack's. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Roy stood and picked up his toolbox. One more thing, behind the insulation in the northwest corner, there's a metal box marked insurance. Carol said you'd know what to do with it. He tipped his cap. I'll be back in the morning with water and a generator. After he left, I climbed back up to the attic and found it, a flat metal box behind the pink fiberglass, exactly where he said. Inside, photocopies of everything from the trunk, plus a USB drive labeled Evidence, FBI copy, and a business card. Special Agent Sandra Webb, FBI White Collar Crime Division, Dallas Field Office. I put the card in my wallet next to Carol's letter, locked the box in my truck, ate the sandwich standing by the window, looking out at 600 acres of flat West Texas dark. She'd built walls around me I couldn't even see, and now I was standing inside them. They arrived the next morning, a black Mercedes and a silver Escalade, pulling up the gravel drive together like they'd rehearsed it. Reed stepped out of the Mercedes in a suit and sunglasses. From the Escalade came a man I'd never met but recognized from Carol's blue folder, Dale Kessler, 65, gray hair slicked back, charcoal vest. He moved like someone used to being obeyed. I was on the porch with my coffee. Reed took off his sunglasses. "Dad, we need to talk." "No," I said. "We don't." Kessler stepped forward and extended his hand. "Mr. Harmon, I'm Dale Kessler. I run an energy company out of Midland. I've been watching your situation and I think I can help. $10 million cash today. You sign the deed, I handle the taxes, the lien, everything. You walk away free and clear." I didn't shake his hand. I pulled out my phone and hit play. Reed's voice filled the porch air. "If he figures out what's under that land before I get him to sign, we lose everything. Guardianship petition is ready. We move him into that place in Elk City and I take over as conservator. After that, the land is ours." Reed went pale. Kessler's hand dropped to his side. I stopped the recording. That was 2 nights ago. Reed didn't know I was listening. Kessler recovered fast. "Mr. Harmon, whatever you think you heard. I heard my son planning to lock me in a nursing facility so he could sell my land to you." I looked at Reed. "How much was he paying you?" Reed said nothing. His jaw was working, but no words came out. A white SUV came up the drive then, dust trailing behind it. Gail Briggs stepped out with her briefcase. Behind her, a man in a Lone Star Energy polo shirt, Clint Harwood, the company's operations director. Gail walked straight to Kessler and handed him a document. "Cease and desist. You are a prohibited party under Section 47C of the Carol Ann Harmon Irrevocable Trust. Any contact with this property, any offer, any agreement with Reed Harmon or any entity he controls triggers immediate federal fraud referral." Kessler looked at the paper. "On what grounds?" "Carol Harmon named you specifically in the trust 18 months ago." She anticipated this conversation. Gail turned to Reed and handed him a second set of documents. "If you file any guardianship petition, any will challenge, or pursue any agreement with Mr. Kessler, you forfeit the entire $9.5 million inheritance. The penthouse, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, all of it, and the FBI receives the embezzlement evidence automatically." Reed stared at the papers in his hands. Clint Harwood stepped forward. "Mr. Harmon, your wife and I finalized our drilling partnership last October. Lone Star Energy funds all operations. We break ground in 60 days. You keep 75% of net royalties. The lease applications with the Texas Railroad Commission were filed last week. Mr. Kessler's competing applications have been denied." Kessler looked at Reed. Cold, quiet. "You told me this was handled." Reed didn't answer. Kessler folded the cease and desist, put it in his pocket, and walked back to the Escalade without another word. No threats, no goodbye. Just gravel crunching under his tires as he drove away. Reed stood alone in the yard. He looked at me and I could see him searching for something. Maybe he wanted me to say it was okay. Maybe he wanted me to open a door he'd already burned down. I didn't give him anything. He got in the Mercedes. Sat there a full minute staring through the windshield. Then he started the engine and drove away. Gail touched my arm. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. Reed withdrew all petitions 3 days later. His attorney called Gail with the exact words. "My client wishes to avoid further conflict and accepts the terms of the trust." No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just a business letter closing a file. I sent him one reply. Told him what I knew, the forged signatures, the shell accounts, the Sunset Pines contract signed while his mother was still alive. Told him not to contact me again. Then I blocked his number. 6 weeks later, the state licensing board revoked Reed's financial advisor credentials. His firm let him go the same week. Last I heard through Gail, Wanda left him. The LA penthouse sold, but the money went fast. He's in Phoenix now, sells used cars. Dale Kessler was arrested by FBI agents at his Midland office that August agent Sandra Webb called to tell me herself. 15 years, federal prison. Wire fraud, conspiracy, industrial espionage. She told me Carol had been feeding evidence to the FBI for nearly 20 months, right through her treatments, right up until the end. She was one of the most dedicated informants I've ever worked with, Sandra said. I didn't know what to say to that. I just thanked her and sat on the porch for a long time after. Drilling started in May. By July, the first well was producing. Clint called me out to the site one afternoon. The crew was gathered around the collection tray, slapping backs. Somebody had opened a cooler. Black oil, thick and steady, filling the tank. 800 barrels a day preliminary, Clint said, grinning. Strong, Mr. Harmon, real strong. I stood there looking at it. Didn't look like $1.5 million a year. Looked like mud, but it wasn't mud. It was everything Carol had known was there. The first royalty check arrived 14 months after drilling began. $370,000 for 1 quarter. I sat at the card table and stared at it for a while. Then I called Gail. "What would Carol do with this?" I asked. "You already know," she said. I did. The Carol Ann Harmon Foundation launched that fall. 3 programs: college scholarships for West Texas kids who can't afford to go, small business grants for local families trying to get something started, and financial help for cancer patients dealing with costs insurance won't cover. Medical bills, travel to specialists, the things that quietly break families while they're already breaking. At the first scholarship ceremony, 50 kids sat in the front rows of the Brewster County Community Center. I stood at the podium and looked out at them, nervous, dressed up, holding onto something they weren't sure was real yet. I told them Carol grew up 20 miles from where we were standing, that she worked in these oil fields for 35 years, built a company from nothing, and never forgot where she came from. I told them wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you build with it. A girl named Nancy Thatcher shook my hand at the end, said she wanted to study petroleum engineering, wanted to do what Carol did, don't do what she did. I told her, do better. She had Carol's same look in her eyes. Certain, unafraid, Roy stops by most Friday mornings now. We sit on the porch and drink coffee and watch the derricks running across the east field. He doesn't say much. Neither do I. We don't have to. The yellow rose Carol and I planted on our 25th anniversary bloomed its first full West Texas summer right there on the porch. Bright as sunlight, just like she always said it would be. I'm 66 years old and starting over. 3 years ago, I had an eviction notice, a rusted key, and no idea what I was walking into. Everyone told me that land was worthless. They were wrong about the land, and they were wrong about me. Here's what I learned from all of it. The people who love you don't always protect you with words. Sometimes they spend 2 years building walls around you that you can't even see, legal walls, financial walls, walls made out of documented evidence and sealed envelopes and a rusted key left with a lawyer. And when everything falls apart, you find out those walls were there the whole time. Don't sign anything you don't fully understand. Don't let anyone rush you when you're grieving. And if someone who loves you tells you to trust something, even if it makes no sense at the time, trust it. Carol knew what she was doing. She always did. Trust the farm. Jack Harmon, Brewster County, West Texas men spend their whole lives building things with their hands, and only at the end do they realize the most important thing they ever built was the trust of the person standing beside them. Reed walked away with $5 million and lost everything that mattered. I walked away with a rusted key and ended up with more than I ever thought possible, because Carol knew the difference between what a man is worth and what a man is worth to the right people. Before you go, if you've never looked into an irrevocable trust or mineral rights on property you own, talk to an estate attorney. Carol spent 2 years protecting Jack because she understood what most people don't until it's too late. Don't wait. Subscribe for more stories like this one.